The McLaren MP44 is one of the most iconic racing cars of all time, though given the disaster of the more recent McLaren-Honda partnership, it may be hard to believe that together they once ruled the sport. With 15 wins from 16 Grand Prix, 15 pole positions, and running in first place for 1,003 out of 1,031 laps, there is little argument that the 1988 McLaren-Honda MP44 is one of the greatest Formula 1 cars of all time. Yet there is an argument, an increasingly contentious one, about who should take credit for the all-conquering design that gave Ayrton Senna his first world title. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the story begins with Formula 1's infamous ringmaster, Bernie Ecclestone. After purchasing Brabham in 1972, he soon promoted a young South African engineer, Gordon Murray, to chief designer. In the late 1970s, Renault showed that turbo-powered engines were the future in F1, and in 1983, Nelson Piquet became the first turbo-powered drivers' champion. Formula 1's first turbo era had arrived. For the 1986 season, Murray designed what would be his last car for the Brabham team, the BT55. Murray's innovations of the car had been conceived to give the team an unfair advantage. In reality, the car became one of Formula 1's most infamous flops, effectively seeing an end to Brabham's era as a competitive team. This, combined with Ecclestone's increasing involvement in F1's politics, led Murray to leave Brabham. As is typical with the revolving doors of F1, McLaren's designer John Barnard left for Ferrari, and when team boss Ron Dennis decided he needed a star replacement, Murray was his man. Murray claims his arrival at McLaren was too late to do anything about the 1987 MP4 a chassis he describes as a real hodgepodge and a consortium car, which is a pretty scathing assessment of a car good enough to win 3 Grand Prix and take McLaren to second in the Constructors' Championship. In that same year, Honda-powered cars took 11 out of 16 Grand Prix victories, and McLaren's tag-branded Porsche just could not keep pace. It was clear to McLaren that a new approach was needed for next season's car. The innovations in the MP44 trace their roots to the demise of ground effect cars at the end of 1982. With the ban in force, Murray struggled to design a new Brabham that could create similar levels of downforce. I'd got to the point with the BT52 where, even with the huge rear wing, we couldn't get any more downforce. It became pretty obvious we needed to clean up airflow to the rear wing. The idea he came up with was to cant the engine over at 18 degrees and lay the driver down to create a low-line car profile. Thus, the Brabham roller skate was born. It was this philosophy that Murray claims he brought with him to the McLaren and into the MP44. This meant requesting an even lower V6 engine from Honda. The engine redesign enabled Honda to use the compact Tilton clutch and therefore lower the crank height by 29mm. Subsequently, a conventional 2-shaft transmission would have resulted in power-sapping driveshaft angles, so Murray turned to Pete Wiseman and David North, who came up with an innovative 3-shaft gearbox. It was a huge risk technically to do a vertical 3-shaft box. It was potentially the Achilles heel. For 1988, the FIA also restricted fuel from 195 to 150 kilograms, meaning teams could reduce the size of their fuel tank, further improving the low-line profile of the car. To complement these changes, the driver was reclined from the normal 45-degree seating angle to something approaching 30 degrees, something Prost initially objected to. This meant the car benefited from a low centre of gravity, which improved the handling. This also resulted in a reduction in the frontal area of the car by 10%, which reduced drag and improved the efficiency of the rear wing, along with a significant increase in aerodynamic performance of the car. Forced to wait until the Honda engine deal was made, design didn't start until August 1987. At the time, computer-aided design, manufacturing and fluid dynamics were all in their infancy, so it's estimated over 90% of the car was drawn up on paper. Couple this with the time difference between the UK and Honda's team in Japan, the sheer amount of development work in such a short period of time was nothing short of remarkable. After a dismal winter test period trialling the new Honda engine in the old chassis, referred to by mechanics as a bitzer, as in bits of this and bits of that, finally the MP44 arrived for a shakedown at Imola. McLaren's test team manager could not have been happier. The MP44 went on track and the lap times just went quicker and quicker and quicker. It was getting dark and Ayrton didn't want to stop. It was an absolutely amazing experience. Just a few days later, Senna would take pole in Rio, only to suffer a gearbox issue, forcing him to start from the pits. After jumping Mansell into the run down to the first corner, Prost led from start to finish, establishing what would become a year of McLaren dominance. Were it not for McLaren's only engine failure of the season for Prost, followed by a collision for Senna at the Italian GP, the team would surely have had a clean sweep of first place finishes in 1988. The team went on to finish 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, with Senna pipping Prost, somewhat courtesy of a rule whereby only the best 11 results counted towards the championship. McLaren also scored 3 times more points than its closest competitor in the constructors' table. After the dominance of the MP4, key team members began to stake their claim on the design of the car. McLaren's technical director Gordon Murray and their chief designer Steve Nichols have both been attributed as the brains behind the MP4, though Murray is quite vocal on the topic. I got the guys together and showed them some Brabham drawings. I showed it to Steve and the guys and told them that was what we were going to do. This conflicts with what Nichols has to say.
We didn't have in our minds to create the lowest possible car. The 4.4 was just an evolution of the 4.3, but the car was taller because we didn't have the low-line engine, we didn't have the small diameter clutch, we had a bigger fuel tank and so forth. So we were able to just go more extreme on the 4.4, not trying to think specifically about making the car low, but with the components that we had to work with, that was just the logical outcome.
He insists that the switch to the Honda V6 from the Porsche-built TAG engine had a lot to do with the way the MP4 ended up. Yet Murray's version of events is at least partially backed up by 2 members of the design team at McLaren in 1987. Neil Oatley recalls seeing layout drawings from the BT55 in the McLaren office, and Bob Bell says that Murray brought a view to bear on how much we could lay the driver down. Murray says that when it became clear what power plant McLaren would have for 1988, it was him who asked for further development from Honda. That claim is backed up by Osamu Goto, development head at Honda Racing. He said he wanted to keep the same driving position as the BT55 Brabham, therefore he'd like a lower engine. In addition to the engine claim, the innovative gearbox that McLaren designed to take advantage of the new V6 was very much Murray's project. In fact, it was his baby. No one involved in the project disputes that. In truth, the term designer should probably not be given to either of them. F1 technical directors don't usually design racing cars, while Nichols describes himself as leading a team of people better than me. Quite why Murray and Nichols aren't content to share the accolades for arguably the best F1 car of all time isn't clear. They back away from rubbishing each other, but those who work with them suggest their relationship wasn't a happy one. And as recently as 2017, Gordon Murray claimed, "When it came down to the car, I had a pretty clean sheet of paper when I first came to McLaren, and it came directly from the last Brabham I did, which was the BT55. So, it seems the disagreement over who came up with the concept behind this legendary race car will continue to rumble on." So while researching the project, we had a moment to consider what Formula 1 history might have been like if McLaren hadn't secured those V6 engines from Honda for 1988. The void could have been filled by the absolutely disastrous Porsche V12. This quote from Steve Nichols sums it up. "The Porsche engineers came along with their proposal and one of them pulled out a single drawing. He started unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. It looked like something that should be in the back of a Leyland bus. What legendary car would you like us to look into next? Leave us a comment in the description to let us know."